Hi guys, and welcome to another video with me, Joe Farr. Today I am mastering a 6-track EP from an artist called Local Analyst from the USA. I'll drop his link down below. Got 6 tracks, they're all in pretty good shape, they're mixed well. I just want to try and bring the best out of them, get some of those lower level details up. Make sure that everything is nicely glued together, give it some depth, some weight, and yeah, let's get going. Okay, the first things I'm hearing are there's quite a lot of punch on the kick, which is not necessarily a problem, but it can kind of mask the lower end, so the kind of sub and the groove, and the low end of the kick drum can kind of get buried underneath the pressure of the punch. So it's a difficult balance, because when you're producing a track, it's real nice to have that punch. But when everything gets mastered and everything gets a bit louder, that punch can just suffocate the lower end a bit. So not a problem. I can set up multiplicity so that just essentially has one band where I can control the amount of punch we've got in the song. The next thing I'm noticing is there's a white noise kind of atmosphere just whooshing along, and that could get problematic because I want to bring up the highs and the mids, and obviously doing that will bring up that white noise as well. So there's a couple of different ways to attack that, and we'll see which one works the best. Let's just have another flick through. Alright, let's get to it. So for the punch, just putting a band in here. I've got a preset which I've made, which works for quite a lot of things. In this case, the punch. Right, so if we just put up the wet, I have all my plugins off, so none of these are actually doing anything. The sound's not even running through them because I've got the dry wet on Reaper. So that's how I just always make sure I'm not messing with anything by accident. So let's take a listen. And if I hit the difference button, you'll hear what's being removed. Yeah, so that's quite a lot that's gone there. Let's back off a little bit on that. So now I've just got control of how much punch I want in the track. And let's keep going. I'm going to put a little E band on that tom. Because as I said, once everything starts coming up and I start beefing things up a bit, that's going to probably stick out a bit too much. So that's just digging into a bit of the resonance or ringiness of that particular sound. Then we can have a look at the white noise. But I don't think multiplicity will handle that very well, so I'm going to use Soothe for that. So it's around 4K. I want to slope these off real steep so it's not affecting anything else. Again, the delta button is the same as the difference button on multiplicity, so it shows you everything that's being removed. So you can also hear it digging into those hi-hats a bit, so we can put the attack up a little bit, see if we can avoid that. I mean, you need a certain amount of attack or it's just not going to grab anything at all. But I think that should leave the hi-hats fairly intact. Let's have a listen. Yeah, so you can hear when I bypass that white noise is coming up. Got about 3 decibels of reduction there. And that should just help us out towards the end. So now I've corrected a couple of things, I want to expand the whole thing. So one of my favorite tools for that is Leapwing Dyne 1. And you can have this set up in many different ways. I'm going to use it linked because, in fact, am I going to use it linked? No, I'm going to use it unlinked, and I'm going to boost bands 2, 3, 4 and 5. So you've got different crossover points here. So I'm basically avoiding anything under 160 Hertz, which is the punch. I don't want to bring more punch out because I've already controlled that. And the low end, I like the way it's sounding. Might need a little boost, but I'm not sure if parallel expansion is the way to go. We'll come back to that. So with this plugin there's a bit of manual level matching. So you've got your input down here and you can match it to the output here by bringing down this slider. You want to match them because otherwise you don't know if you're making much of a difference to the actual sound or if you're just being fooled by the loudness of the output. So I think I've got them fairly matched. Not far off. Then I can use the bypass button here to hear the difference. Probably going a bit too much in the highs, I'd say, because like I've mentioned, that white noise is a problem, and that's going to be around here. In fact, it's going to be exactly around the crossover point, so I might change that to 3.5 so that I know that the white noise is within this band here. In fact, it's still leaking into this band, so let's go to 2.5K. Yeah, that's better. Then there's a little bit of air on this band. So I'm happy with that. Then I'm going to move on to a bit more expansion. In fact, I'm going to use bass lane to just boost a little bit of the sub-frequencies. So we can look at our spectrum. And it's around 55 Hertz. Is the fundamental of the bass or the kick or both around there, but I'm going to go a bit lower. Just make sure I capture everything and then boost about 50%. So as if I go through and there's a plugin that I'm not using, I'll just get rid of it. So Arbiter is another problem solver, similar to Multiplicity and Soothe, but like with all these tools, some are better at some jobs than others. But this time I've nailed the 2 things I wanted to nail, so I'm just going to remove that. I've got refinement there, which is a harshness control, which may get some use further down the chain. Then we're going to just give it some weight. So first for that is Oxford Inflator. Which is based on old consoles. I don't really know how it works, but it's a bit of an industry standard in mastering. Just gives everything a bit more body and weight without adding too much extra gain. I have it set down around a decibel to allow for any extra gain. Then there's Aroma, which is, I believe, an emulation of some of the Dave Hill bits of kit. So he has on his audio interfaces or converters some analog emulated digital things, and apparently this is emulating those, but I don't know. But the one I like is Pepper, which I have at 50%, and then I have the mix at 50% because I don't want to crush it too much. Then I've got Equilibrium, which is just a very clean EQ if you want it to be, and I can do some overall balance with that. So I might just try a shelf on everything. Then I'm going to hit my clipper, which is standard clip, and I use the Soft Clip Pro setting. And like most music in this genre or style, it's just going to be the kick that's getting clipped. So we can just push it, see how much we can get away with. That's cool. I'm not noticing any distortion there. Then I've got TDR infrasonic, which is for cutting out any subsonic frequencies that we can't really hear. So I've got that set to 30 Hertz with a steep slope, and I'm just going to put the mix to wet. That's just going to get rid of all these real subby frequencies. But as with anything by Tokyo Dawn, it's super clean. So I don't have to worry about it. I'm not worried about phase or anything. It does its job really well. So then I'm going to push into the limiter, which is a preset I've made, which is mostly for electronic music with a really short release. So we're just going to push into that and see how we're sounding, see how it sounds, pushing for the level we want to aim for. Which of course is always a hot debate because there's a loudness war still, especially with dance music. Everyone's pushing for louder. There's more of a, there are more restrictions within the streaming world because you've got Spotify and the other platforms doing loudness normalization, which either bumps up the level of your track or pushes it down, depending on how far you've pushed that mix and that master. But with this kind of music, you know, the mix is already at a certain level, so even if it wasn't mastered, the track would still get turned down on Spotify because the dynamic range is not so, they don't have a big dynamic range, these tracks, because that is the style of the sound. If it was really sparse and minimal and loads of headroom, it wouldn't sound like techno. So that is sounding okay. loudness wise, and I'm not crushing the limiter too much. So I'm just keeping an eye on the VU meter, which is the classic metering tool, and also the LUFS over here, because people are obsessed with numbers. And some techno I'm being asked to push to -6 LUFS. But again, that music, that style of production is super hard and heavy, and it's probably already hitting 8 before it's come to be mastered. So that style as well has a bit less sub and more harsh highs and mids, whereas this is has a bit more depth and warmth to it. Yeah, so my main concern for this track at the beginning was that white noise. So I'm just going to, and that is bugging me a little. And I also just want to test out something new, which is a compressor, which I've got a preset, just gets me in the right ballpark. And this compressor is an emulation of apparently a one-off, and it just does some nice things, so I just want to see how it sounds. So the character of it is quite a little bit of a smile curve. It's boosting the lows a little bit, and it's ducking some of those mids, which I like, but this track doesn't have a huge amount going on in the mid-range, so we don't want to take too much out of the way. So I'm just going to put the dry wet to 50%. See how we like that. Oh, it's got to be 50. Got to be 50. Cue. I'm just going to print this, and then we can do a side-by-side comparison. Okay, so I'm just going to level match our final master. Just going to back off on the limiter to make it a bit more fair. Turn up this channel. There's the pre-master with nothing applied. Let's go. Yes, I'm pretty happy with that. And from there, I can compare to the pre-master and see if I've ruined anything, basically, or if I've taken away too much of the original character, or by bringing something out in the mix I've lost something else. All those considerations I've been making all the way through, I can just check whether I was right or wrong, or if I was somewhere in the middle. Nice, happy with that. So I'm just going to put the limiter back to where it was. There's a handy undo button up here. Just have a little listen. So I really do think the key to this one was the punch. You can hear the kick drum on the pre-master. It's so much more obvious now that the track has been mastered that that kick is not sitting right in the mix in terms of the punch. It sounds kind of boxy, knocky, and I can't really hear much of the sub. Let's just listen again. So pre-master. Master. Just allowing a little bit more of the punch through on the master there. And then my concern about the white noise, it's not going to hurt anyone's ears, but maybe it sticks out a little bit too much in the mix. That's just something I will put to the artist and ask if they want to tweak it. Then I can remaster it. So I can just cut the sides out on this EQ here, just to see how much difference we get. That might just do it. That might just balance it out enough that we don't have to request a new, or don't have to raise concerns about that with the artist. As you can see by the readout here that quite a lot of the energy of that sound is coming from the sides. So if we can just tame that a little bit. I know this EQ work looks a bit drastic, but it's not really. Maybe a little bit for mastering, but sounds good. And that is that track done. So, see you on the next one.